Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's Friday again, and this time it's Parashat Behar and Bechukotai. I'm joined here today by a baby who just woke up. Her name is Nahari Tzion, and she is less than a month old. Baruch Hashem, she'll be a month old on Monday. Nachon. And she's not in the best of moods at the moment, so we'll give her a little cuddle. Let's talk about the parasha. In our parasha, we have a lot of occurrences of the number 7. A lot of the occurrences of the number 7. And this is most obvious in one of the main topics that appears in our parasha, which is the story of Shemitah. Every 7 years, we stop our agricultural work and we have a day off, a year off, in essence. Very similar to Shabbat. Indeed, this is called Bashana Shvit, Shabbat, Shabbaton, Yel Aretz, Shabbat Adonai. Very similar to Shabbat. 6 days of work, 1 day of rest. So too here, 6 years of work, 1 year of rest. And there's all of the dinim of Shemitah. Some of them still apply today. And that's actually quite well known. Now, it then continues on, because in addition to there being a cycle of 7, like the week, there's also a cycle of 7 times 7. וספרת לך 7 שבתות שנים, 7 שנים, 7 פעמים. 7 times 7, 7 cycles of Shemitah, and then on the 49th day, והיו לך ימי 7 שבתות השנים, 9 ו40 שנה, והעברת שופר תרועה בחודש השביעי, and then in the 7th month, after 7 times 7, right, which is the 7th month is Tishrei, then we have Yovel, Yom Kippur, בעשור לחודש, ביום הכיפורים, תעבירו שופר בכל ארצכם. This is called the Yovel. Now, when I read וספרת לך 7 שבתות שנים, the very first thing that came to mind is what we're doing at the moment, which is Sfirat HaOmer. Actually, in the previous parasha, we find that we are commanded to do Sfirat HaOmer in very, very similar language. We find, for example, when it comes to Sfirat HaOmer, וספרתם לכם ממחרת השבת מיום אביכם את עומר התנופה 7 שבתות תמימות תהיינה. And you should count after Pesach, or after Shabbat, miyom aviachem et omer atnufa, from when we start the Omer, that's why it's called Sfirat HaOmer, we count 49 days. Sheva Shabbatot Timimot. We count 7 weeks. Notice the similarity. Usafarta lecha Sheva Shabbatot Shanim in our parasha, and here Usafartem lachem Sheva Shabbatot Timimot. There's a very clear symbolism here to the cycle of 7. Cycle of 7. I was thinking to myself, interesting. There's something very poignant about the number 7. I wonder what it means. And as I was continuing to read the parasha, and because it's a double parasha, we also read Parashat Bechukotai. And in Parashat Bechukotai, there are all of the... you're waking up? Come have a look. In Parashat Bechukotai, there are all of the different promises versus curses, and I noticed these are, if you, basically the small print of the Torah, if you keep the Torah, then you will get good things, and if you don't keep the Torah, you will get bad things. And I noticed that the number 7 appears all the time, and we see likewise each and every stage where God kind of ramps it up, it's always using the number 7. ויאספתי עליכם מכה 7 כחטאותיכם. Right? והלכתי אתכם מחמת קרי ויסרתי אתכם אף אני 7 על חטאותיכם. And throughout the case here, 7 is always brought up. So much so that when the final exile is described, come here. When the final exile is described, we see that Hashem says, "Az tirtzeh haaretz et shabtotea." Then, when the Jews are off the land, they are in exile, then the land will be fallow, as in it will not be worked, and then it will catch up on all of the Shabbatot, all of the Shmitot that it didn't have when you were on it, if you weren't keeping the Shemitah. Az tirtzeh haaretz et shabtotea kol yemei hashama v'atem be'eretz oyvechem. When you are in foreign lands, as tishbot haaretz v'tirtzeh et shavtotea kol yemei hashama tishbot et asher lo shavta b'shabbatotchem b'shivta alea. There, Shabbat, the 7 days, the 7 weeks, the 7 years. This is the cycle that will come back. Indeed, we even find at the very end of Parashat Behar, again, it says, Et Shabdotai Tishmoru. There's something very important about the symbolism of 7 and Shabbat. And I want to take a moment to just talk about potentially a new interpretation to the number 7. Cycles exist in nature. Nature is very cyclical. We have, for example, the cycle of the month, right, which is more or less 30 days. We have the cycle which often connects to the menstrual cycle as well. There's something very feminine about the moon. There's the cycle of the year, which is 365 days. There's the cycle of the day itself, which is from sunset to sundown, right? Everything is in cycles. And yet, the Jewish people introduced the cycle of 7, the week. The week Shabbat that appears first in human history in Parashat Bereshit, right? At the very beginning of the Torah, this is a God-made invention. There is something in many ways supernatural about the number 7. There is no significant natural explanation for the number 7 in the week. Nothing happens at the end of the week. It's not like the day, the night, where there's actual change in nature, or the year where the sun literally, goes around the seasons, the moon. There's nothing happening at the end of the week. But rather, Hashem says, no, I am imposing upon nature a structure that gives nature meaning. The only reason to work is if we have why to work. The only reason to have the 6 days of the week is if we have Shabbat. Shabbat represents a reason. Bless you. Shabbat represents meaning. Shabbat represents a connection with something bigger than ourselves. That's why, by the way, Shabbat is a fantastic time for us to reconnect to our families, to reconnect to our religion. That's why we go to the Beit Knesset. We go and we gather together as a community. We have special communal events. We meet with friends. We spend time with family. That is what Shabbat is all about. But even more than that, Shabbat is a time, as it says here as well, Shabbat la Hashem. If we are able to take a part out of our life and say, no, this is dedicated to God, Shabbat Hayom la Hashem, then we can truly recognize that everything else comes from God. Just like we separate Truma to the Kohen, we separate Bikurim, we separate a Bechor, every single stage of Jewish life, we always recognize, 1 second, this isn't from us, this is from God. This is something that we have to acknowledge, and we acknowledge that through the number 7. When it comes to Shemitah, it's the same idea. God gave us the land. We have to give 1 year where we don't work the land. This is the year of the land. Shabbat la Hashem, as it says in the Pasuk. This is a year where this is God's land. This is not our land. By the way, very important message. We always say, this land is my land, and this is Eretz Yisrael Shalanu. No. As Rashi, the very first Rashi in the Torah says, the whole world belongs to God, and this is God's land. If He chooses to give it to us, then great. If He chooses to kick us off it, as we see in Parashat Bechukotai, because we are not behaving, we are not fulfilling our destiny, then it's not our land. It's not our land. But what is that? What is the significance of 7 times 7? Whether it's Sfirat HaOmer, whether it's the Yovel, I don't know. I'm very honest. I'm sure much has been written about this, and there's much that can be said about this as well. But I think when we're talking about 7 times 7, this is trying to really hammer it home. Going from Pesach to Shavuot, going from, in many ways, the beginning of the harvest to the end of the harvest, going from the beginning of the creation of the state of the Jewish people, the nation of Israel, Pesach, to Shavuot, which is the spiritual nation where we, Matan Torah, where we come into the land and we recognize Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh. Similarly with Yovel, 7 times 7 is there to give us an understanding of national renewal. Yovel is a moment where we're no longer just talking about the farmer and his field, but rather the whole nation. All of the slaves, the Jewish slaves, are released. Everyone goes back to their land. There's some kind of reset. In many ways, a re-entering into the land of Israel. That is what Yovel represents. Kratem Dror, we cry freedom. This is like Pesach, Chag HaCherut, all wrapped up with Yom Kippur and a renewal of the soul, of the self. There's something very important. This is again recognizing the supernatural within the natural world. In the world of numbers, every number has symbolism. As we well know, who knows one? I know one. One is Hashem. Two are the luchas, right? The duality of Yetzar Tov, Yetzar Hara, day and night, Kodesh and Chol. Three, we know from the song, three are the fathers. There's the idea of a stool. In order to be stable, you need three. Three is something that has a holding. Al shalosh dvarim ha'olam omed. Three is able to actually sustain, and a chuta mishulash lo b'mirayin, a triple coiled rope is harder to break. Four represents the four different directions, right? The four different points on a compass. Arba'i mahot, each one taking us in a slightly different direction. Chamesh, again, chamisha chumshei Torah. Think of it in many ways like the center of the four. All of the four come into the center. That is the five. Five is in the center of the four. Six is a cube. Six is not just the four directions, but also up and down. And seven is Shabbat. Seven is the idea of the center within the cube, the center of the experience of the universe, of nature. That is what seven is. And I think this comes forth beautifully as we see in our parasha, both in Shabbat of the week, in Shabbat of the year, in Sfirat HaOmer from last week's parasha, and in the Yovel from going forward this week's parasha, and also in the brachot and the klalot. Seven is reminding us of God's hand in nature. That is what seven is. Zeicher l'maaseh bereshit, but also Zeicher l'yetziat Mitzrayim. Mikrei Kodesh is God meeting us in the world, in history, in nature, in universe, trying to tell us there's something meaningful behind this. And I want you to count, and I want you to recognize that meaning. And there, Bezrat Hashem, we get to the number 8. And 8 is Me'al HaTeva, 8 is from outside the universe already. That is the spirituality of Hashemayim, Shemaim LaHashem. And that already is a whole different Dvar Torah. So I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. From me and Nahari Tzion, say Shabbat Shalom, Nahari Tzion. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Yeah, you even got a little bit of a smile. Shabbat Shalom to everyone. And Bezrat Hashem, I wish you have a good